फजीलत शेख, बहुत सारे इस्लाम पसंद असातिज़ा की तरफ से मैं ये क्वेश्चन कर रहा हूँ, हमारी पाकिस्तान की यूनिवर्सिटीज़ में एथियज़म और फेमिनिज़म ये बहुत स्ट्रिक्टली फैल रहा है। स्पेशली कुछ ऐसी यूनिवर्सिटीज़ हैं कि जहाँ पर तो एक ख़ास इलाके से आने वाले लोग तकरीबन एथियस्ट थिंकिंग के साथ आ रहे हैं, और कुछ सोशल साइंसेज में मौजूद बुक्स को एक एजेंडे के तहत प्रमोट किया जा रहा है, जिसकी वजह से फेमिनिज्म बहुत ज़्यादा फैल रही है, स्पेशली मर्दों में। तो आप उन टीचर्स को क्या एडवाइस करेंगे कि वो किस तरीके से इसको टैकल करें और किस तरह इस्लाम को डिफेंड करें और बच्चों को बचाएं, क्योंकि बहुत ज़्यादा तादाद में बच्चे एथियस्ट हो रहे हैं।
So the questioner, our brother Hafidhullah Ta'ala, asked that he finds that in many of the institutions of learning here in Pakistan, such as the universities and elsewhere, that there is some infiltration taking place from the direction of atheism and feminism. That there are those who enter these institutions and they have already adopted or have been indoctrinated into these atheistic ideologies and strong feminism, especially amongst the men, that men are promoting feminism. And of course it's in the interest of men. Men who wish to exploit women will push for feminism. This is a form of exploitation. Why? Because when men promote feminism and the rights of women, what they really mean is that we are liberalizing women, or we are liberalizing the behavior of women. We want women to be liberal. What does that mean to men? It means that you can exploit them sexually, monetarily, economically you can exploit them. Why? Because now you can employ them. And now your workforce is multiplied by a large number. So the less attachment that the woman has to her religion, then those evil men who have evil intentions and wish to exploit men will take advantage of these women who think that they've been liberated. So now you don't have to dress. Now when a woman, the more she uncovers, who is she giving pleasure to? The eyes of men. How does she get pleasure out of walking around half naked? Where's her pleasure in that? The pleasure is in the eyes of men. So the more that a man can tell a woman, actually the more you uncover, you're liberating yourself. The more you wear tight clothes, you're liberating yourself. The more that you dance on screen and sing, this is liberation for you. Who's making the money? Men. It's the men who are pimping them. In reality, they're the ones who are selling them. It's a sale, it's a bargain that they're making. They're trading women. This is the slave trade of women. But this is a slave trade where women have agreed to the contract. They've agreed to it in the name of freedom. Because all of this, any society where you see a woman that she's convinced or indoctrinated or brainwashed into thinking, the more you uncover yourself, the more that you partake in pornographic material, which is, one of the biggest evils on the internet, probably the biggest evil on the internet in terms of sins, other than shirk, is this pornography, accessible to everyone, wherever they are in the world. Without the cooperation of women, that's not happening, is it? If women didn't cooperate with that, that's not happening. Has this increased since the Second World War or decreased? It's increased exponentially. So much so that there are bars and there are, restrictions, firewalls that are set up to prevent pornographic material entering into the Muslim lands. But it's hard to fight. So the idea of feminism, which is promulgated and spread in societies, is in fact, it should be relabeled as exploitation of women. Because that's what's really happening. When you drive this agenda of atheism, it means that now you don't have a Rabb to answer to. If you don't have a Lord to answer to, then you become what? You become nihilistic. As far as you're concerned, there is no any, morality becomes relativist. You are basically judging morality in accordance to what's happening around you, not in accordance to scripture or tradition. So fornication is no longer bad. Why? Because who says it's bad? Because the only one who was telling you it was bad was Allah through revelation. Your fitrah was telling you that it's bad, so you held back because of two reasons. That's why you find that the highest rate of suicide is amongst the homosexual community, LGBT. Highest rate of suicide. And they say, why? Oh, because they are oppressed and society doesn't treat them well. Well, if that was the case, the poor Syrians and the Iraqis who have been bombed for the last 20 years, and the Afghanis, and those nations in Africa that starve every 10-15 years, they watch their children die in front of them. They have the highest suicide rate, yet they have the least. They have the least suicide rate. High suicide rate is amongst these types of communities. Why? Because whether it be fornication or homosexuality, when a person engages in those lewd acts, there is something internally that he despises in the act. He feels it. He knows it's wrong. So he wakes up, or after the act he feels guilt. So he thinks to himself, God's going to punish me. If he's a Christian, Jew, Muslim, he has this concept of a God. That God will punish me. I've done something wrong. I feel it's wrong. And I've been told it's wrong. So how do I get rid of the guilt? You go to one of those counselors, he tells you, well, a God of love wouldn't tell you that to love another man is wrong. So either there is no God, or you got the wrong God. Most of them head towards no God. And that's why they're atheists. Right? Likewise with people who are engaged in so much sin and transgression that they don't really want any limits on what they do. Whether it be drinking, taking drugs, fornicating, sleeping around, taking a different woman every night, prostitution, whatever, homosexuality, same-sex marriages. How do you get rid of that guilt? The fact that Allah one day is going to punish me and question me. If you deny the Rabb, guilt disappears, but actually it doesn't disappear. Because suicide rate is still, exponentially higher than anybody else, than any other community. They have a higher suicide rate than even prostitutes do. Which shows what? That there is something they know inherently is not right. There is something inside of them, even though the fitrah has become corrupted, and the mind has become corrupted, and the heart has become sick, but there is something in them that tells them, this is wrong. I'm doing something wrong. Well, there's no God. So they say, okay, there's no God, there's no God. So they convince themselves, get drunk and, sit in a room with other people who say there's no God, look at those idiots bowing their heads, look at those idiots in sajda. Then they go and commit the act, but they still can't get rid of the guilt. Because it's wrong. The human psyche does not allow it. Yes, you do get sociopaths and psychopaths, those who are pathologically, they have some illness in their minds that may not ever feel guilt. It's true, you find murderers like that as well. They'll kill and kill and kill and never feel guilty about it. Right? However, the vast majority of humanity, they know it is wrong. It feels wrong. Nature tells me it's wrong. Nurture tells me it's wrong. It is not possible that this act that I'm doing of homosexuality, it is right. Because it is unnatural. I don't have to describe anything to you. You know it's unnatural. You can't produce children like that. If you put a whole community of homosexuals on an island without any female, how many generations would they live? 0. 0. So why are you teaching the people that men can menstruate and they can get pregnant? Because you know it's false. The narrative is false. But if you say it for long enough, and you say it at the right age, year after year after year after year, then you're going to be believed, just like the monkey. Humans came from monkeys, right? So they came from monkeys. Why? Because you were told at the age of 5. Then you were told at the age of 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 in every Western school across Europe, the UK, and most parts of America, even though certain states they don't allow that to be taught because they have some sense of Christianity with them. But by and large, that's what they're taught. They're taught it at the age of 5. You see the images everywhere. You know, from a crouching monkey, and then slowly the image changes up until he's standing upright and he becomes a human being. That's an indoctrination from the age of 5. At school they teach them. Then when they enter in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, by the time they're 16 and 17, it's a done deal. Now the other side has to work to get that out of them, that indoctrination. They've been hijacked. And they've been held hostage to this indoctrination, to the extent that your exam results are built upon you giving that answer. Try and give another answer and see how many marks you get. That's your education. You can't get through an exam unless you affirm that mankind came from monkeys. Right? And you affirm the theory of evolution and the Big Bang theory, all of these falsehoods. Unless you affirm them, you can't get through your exams. You can't get through your degree, depending on what degree you're doing. Sociology is no difference. Those theories that they're taught, in sociology, those ideas and those things that they want the people to expand their minds with, you can't get through exams unless you know those theories. Those theories are taught to indoctrinate. Feminism is involved in that. They talk about modernism and postmodernism and so on in sociology. You would know that. And the various theories. These are driven into whom? So imagine from the age of 5 to 16 or age 5 to 18. This is the indoctrination year in, year out. Then when you go to university, now this is the finishing school. This is where all of that comes together. And by the time they leave university, they are now du'at and callers to that. They got missionaries. This is their Darul Ulum. This is their education system from 5 to 22. How do Muslims combat that? How do we combat that? The way that we do it is, we have control over our children, over our families. So long as that remains in our hands, because who's going to give their children away? No one. You die before you did that. You would rather die so that your children survive. You do it for your wife. That's what men do. Someone comes to attack your wife or to take your wife, you'll die for her. Even if there's 10 of them, you'll say, you know what? I'll die, but I'm not going to let them go. If they get to her, it's going to be over my dead body. Because that's what men are like, men with honor and respect. That's how we live our lives. But if you give them your children, which they do in the West, not so much in Muslim countries. In Muslim countries, there is this inherent society, thing in society that we have in Muslim countries, where tradition and Islamic values and Islamic heritage kicks in. And it kind of builds a barrier. So the things that you've mentioned today, yes, they are beginning in these Muslim countries, but the influence is coming from outside. It is not from here. It is external. So they're going away, these teachers or these lecturers are going away, coming back, and they're bringing back these books and these ideas, and they're watching it on YouTube, and they're thinking, you know what, this is what we should raise our women upon in Pakistan or in the Muslim countries, and our young men. So the men grow up to be effeminate and even gay. Nice word for a bad act. Homosexuality is the correct word. People of the same gender having relationships. They're the same sex and they want to have relationships. They've legalized marriage in most of the Western world. A man can marry a man, a woman can marry a woman. 2 men can adopt a child from an orphanage or from the foster care system. They can adopt. They can adopt a Muslim child. And that happens in Britain. And it's not unusual in Europe, across Europe. If you think about Britain, over 2 million Muslims. You think about France, over 4 million Muslims. You think about Germany, nearly 5 million Muslims. Some of these Muslims are sinful and bad. They're taking drugs and they're into prostitution and they're into, they're pimps and drug users. So they'll have a relationship with a woman and the social services will come in because they're not looking after the child. Social services takes the baby into care. That baby is the child of a Muslim. Sinful Muslim, but a Muslim. Or the mother and father died. That child now goes into the care, into social care. That child is open to adoption. And he can easily be adopted by a homosexual couple. That's not unusual. In France, in Germany, in Britain, in Sweden, in Norway, in America, in Canada. This is not unusual for Syrian children, or Pakistani children, or Afghani children, or African children to be adopted by a homosexual couple. So now, if the teachers in the schools in the UK, primary school, secondary school, in colleges, in universities, imagine these teachers are now in their late 20s. They're not in their 50s. These are young teachers going into school and they're teaching in primary schools. You look at the average primary school in the UK, the teachers will be in their 20s and 30s. They've been raised in this generation. They themselves entered into school at the age of 5 and they've been indoctrinated. By the time they graduated or did their postgraduate certificate of education, PGCE in the UK, now they are fully fledged callers to the LGBT movement. They'll celebrate in schools in Britain, in the inner cities, and in France, and in Canada, where a school, a primary school, can have over 90%, maybe 95% Muslim children. They will celebrate in that school the Gay Pride Day. And they will do all types. They will invite men dressed up as women, dancing on stage in front of Somali children, Moroccan children, Pakistani children, Bangladeshi children, Egyptian children, Afghan children, at the age of 5. And the parents will send the children back the next day, and then the next day, and then the next year, and the next year. Now you got these Muslims who have been indoctrinated. That now comes into the Muslim countries, because they will visit. Then that infiltration enters into the Muslim countries. So who's going to hold it back? Who are you waiting for? That's our job. Du'at, Tulab al-Ilm, young and old, that we become strong in the knowledge of our Sharia, our Deen, our Aqidah, and know the arguments of these people. Because they need help. Our communities need help. Because they're being hijacked with the values of the West. These aren't Islamic values. They're not concerned about Islamic values. They're concerned about Western values. And they even called Western values, and that's why when I use the term Western values, every one of you understands what it means. Because that's the dominant culture in the world today. They have the wealth, they have the power, they have the culture, they have the media, and so on. But what we have is the Aqidah, and the Sharia, and the Kitab, and the Sunnah. What we don't have is men and women that are willing to hold on to this and hold on to it staunchly and spread this deen to the people, so that we can protect our children from these foreign values. What kind of, when you think about the amount of arrogance and the hubris that is required for them to think like that, that basically we don't give a damn about the rest of the world. You will adopt LGBT values, LGBTQ plus, right? You will adopt it, and they're forcing it upon the rest of the world. So any interaction between a Muslim country and the West, this comes onto the agenda, the rainbow flag. So in Muslim countries at their embassies, on Pride Day, they'll put up the gay flag. It's no longer, the national flag. It's the pride flag. That's how big it is to them. And you think to yourself, If you want to corrupt yourselves and your nations, then keep it to yourselves. Why are you spreading it to the rest of the world? The reason why is because beyond this there are other agendas of these people, which is the annihilation of religion and Islam. They don't want religion in the world. And Islam is the staunchest religion. It is the hardest religion to infiltrate and harm. Why? Because it's so pristine still. After 1400 years, it's still pristine. If you want the source, here it is. It's on my left hand side. It's all here. What are you going to do? Burn every book in the world? You can't. Allah will not allow you to do it. So the resistance is really coming from the Muslims. That's why you see some of those Christians that are hard against Islam, they say, you know what, these Muslims, they will hold on. They can't hold on in the West because they got nowhere to go. They're losing their children on a daily basis to drugs, prostitution, homosexuality, unhealthy behavior. But when they see Muslims holding on to their religion, they know that these people are different. So how do you get to our communities? You know how to get to our communities? Through our children. They're not concerned about me anymore, really. No Mahmoud, no Tariq, no Zubair, no man. We're beyond that. We're too old as far as they're concerned. Let's get to their grandchildren. Let's get to their young children. That's what they want. That's why, woe be to you if you end up in the West. Because they will take your children. And they will not be your children anymore. They will be the children of the state. In Pakistan, you have a choice. You should educate your children with the best education. Religion first and worldly education second. We don't want our children to be ignorant in the dunya. We want them to live and to adapt to the challenges of this world. We want them to do that, but on the foundation of Tawheed and Islam and the Sharia. If your children end up in the West, Wallahu musta'an, you will not have control. There is legislation that is coming in, year in and year out, that is making it harder and harder for the parents to make decisions about the education of their own children. That's why I meet, in a month, I'd say on a monthly basis, I'll meet 8, former Muslims. They used to be Muslims, kids, and they become atheists. I'll meet them on a monthly basis. I'll meet more converts because the other way is greater. We are pulling in more than we're losing. But we shouldn't be losing. If you go and follow, some of the, city centre da'wah or CC da'wah in the UK, you'll see every week, Muslimah, Muslim, African, white Muslim, Irish Muslim, Scottish Muslim. Why? Because they're taking shahada all over the Western world. But at the same time we're losing as well. Children who are born into Muslim families, we're losing. But we're gaining a man who's 40 years old, been a kafir all of his life, and he becomes a Muslim. But why are we losing youngsters? We're not losing elders, by the way. People of my age don't leave Islam. People of Nu'man's age don't leave Islam. Zubair's age, they won't leave Islam. Mahmoud's age, they won't leave Islam. Who's leaving Islam? It's that age band, between about 14 and 25. They're the ones that they're targeting. Now, that missionary work is infiltrating into the Muslim lands. How? Primarily through social media. Then when these, as you mentioned, the teachers and the educators in institutions that look towards the West as the standard of quality of education, they're watching that and they're coming into schools in Muslim countries and teaching that to the children in these schools here. So we have to work. We have to pay attention to our children and raise them Kitab, Sunnah, Salafiyah, and make them strong, give them a strong back, give them a strong education. And the more that they harm us, the stronger we become upon our religion, not weaker. The more fashion that they show, well, this is the latest haircut of this footballer, the more that we look at it and oppose it, because that was Rasulullah. In Mecca, If they had a particular hairstyle, he'd differ with them. He went to Medina, he saw their hairstyle, he differed with that one as well. So the more that they have of their culture, the more the Muslim adheres to his own heritage culture. If they dress a certain way, we're not talking about haram and halal a lot of the time. We try to not resemble them in their behavior, in their clothing, in their hairstyle. And fashion is one of the biggest avenues of taking our youth. Whether it be hairstyles, sports gear, it is one, even following their football. Football is a religion in Britain. That's what they say. You see on billboards, if your religion is football, worship here, and they'll have a picture of one of the football stadiums in Britain. They actually see it as a religion, even though they're saying it tongue in cheek. But people will do more for football than they will do for Allah. They will do more for football than they will do for a poor person or a dying African. That's what they are. So when you look at, how connected am I? How much do I indulge myself into their customs, into their behaviors? Do I cry when they cry? So if their football team loses, like England lost the European Cup, in the final they lost, Pakistanis were crying. What are you crying for? Nigerians are crying. Why? Because they're raised in Britain. So they're taught throughout their lives, you love what we love and you hate what we hate. You cry when we cry. But the Queen's about to die. Well, she's in her 90s. Right? When she dies, you'll find Muslims crying. Our Queen has died. Our Queen. As if you ever got anything out of it. Because this is in schools they'll have mourning. In state schools they'll mourn for her. They'll have this, their version of the khatab, as it were, and mark them or whatever, their version of it, the wake or the mourning period. Because that's how they are indoctrinating children. So if there is some of that in you, then repel it. If there is some of that in you, then repel it and look for your Islamic standards and Islamic etiquettes and Islamic heritage. Because that is what will give you honor. That is what will give you honor, and to your children, and to their offspring. If you want Islam to survive generation after generation after generation, we have to do it now. If you don't do it, Allah will replace you with people who are better than you. And we don't want that. We want to be the ones that Allah has chosen. Barakallahu feekum. We'll finish upon that. وَسُبْحَانَكَ اللَّهُمَّ وَبِحَمْدِكَ أَشْهَدُ أَنْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنْتَ أَسْتَغْفِرُكَ وَأَتُوبُ إِلَيْكَ.